Hey there, and welcome to this deep dive all about textile colorists. You guys sent in some really interesting stuff for this one, I gotta say. Did you know there's a whole thing about dyeing natural fibers versus synthetic ones?
Oh, for sure. It's pretty amazing how much that tiny fiber structure can impact a color, right? Makes you realize these textile colorists need to have a good grasp of material science, too.
Totally. It's wild, right? Who knew there was so much science behind our clothes? But before we dive into all that, let's back up a sec. For those of us who don't work with fabrics every day, what exactly is a textile colorist? What do they, actually do?
Well, basically, they're the ones responsible for all those amazing colors you see on, well, pretty much everything made of fabric. Clothes, furniture, you name it. They take a designer's vision for a color and, I don't know, make it happen, I guess. Like, they develop the formulas, test them out, the whole 9 yards. And the big thing, making sure those colors stay consistent,
Yeah.
especially with mass production and all that.
Oh, yeah, that's got to be huge. Imagine ordering a bright red sweater online and then bam, you get this weird maroon thing instead.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where that whole science part gets really important. Textile colorists, they're dealing with dyes, chemicals, water pH, even the temperature has to be just right. Any little change can totally mess up the color.
Wow, talk about precision. So, where does all this magic happen? What's their workspace got to be like?
Think like a science lab, but way more colorful. You've got your beakers and stuff, but also fabric swatches everywhere. And of course, all those fancy color matching tools.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What kind of tools are we talking about here?
Well, they've got the classic stuff like spectrophotometers. They measure how much light reflects off the fabric. But the really cool part is the tech. There's software now that lets them, play around with different dyes virtually. So they can see how they'll interact without actually like mixing anything yet.
Whoa, it's like a digital color playground. No waste, just endless possibilities. That's amazing.
Right. It's super useful, especially with everyone wanting more eco-friendly options these days.
Speaking of eco-friendly, I was reading about how natural dyes are making a comeback. What's the deal with that?
Well, people are definitely becoming more aware of what their clothes are doing to the planet. Natural dyes, from plants and insects, they're a good alternative to the synthetic stuff.
Right, that makes sense. But aren't they a lot harder to work with? Getting those bright, long-lasting colors can't be easy, right?
You're telling me.
Yeah.
Natural dyes need a totally different process, and they can fade easier too from washing or sunlight and all that. Honestly, some of these textile colorists are like modern-day alchemists, using old techniques and new science to get those beautiful, sustainable colors.
There's that art meets science thing again. It's so cool. So we talked about the technical stuff, but what about the actual job of being a textile colorist? What are the pros and cons? It's funny you should mention the whole pros and cons thing. One of the articles you sent, it was an interview with a senior textile colorist. Anyway, they were talking about how one of the most important skills is actually operations monitoring. And I gotta say, that was not what I was expecting.
It's funny how that stuff works, right?
Yeah.
It makes total sense when you think about it. If you want the colors to be perfect, especially on a huge scale, the whole process has to be spot on, you know?
Yeah, I guess.
Like those big dyeing vats they use, hundreds of gallons of water and dye. And if the temperature's off by even a degree, dot boom, wrong color.
Seriously? No way.
Oh yeah, it's all connected. So these textile colorists, they're basically watching gauges and dials like, I don't know, pilots in a cockpit or something, making sure everything stays in that sweet spot.
That's a pretty intense image. All that for the colors we see every day. It's kind of mind-blowing. So we talked about the technical side, but what about the career path itself? What if someone's listening to this and they're like, sign me up? How do you even get started as a textile colorist?
Well, like with most things, education is a good place to start. RoleCatcher, the website you're talking about, they were saying most textile colorists have at least a bachelor's degree.
Yeah, that seems to be the standard. But the cool thing is, there are so many different degrees that could work. It's not just textile science or whatever. I saw color science, chemistry, even fine arts.
Exactly, because it really is a mix of everything. You need that solid color theory, but also the chemistry behind how dyes work, and even that artistic eye, being able to spot those tiny differences in shade and all that.
Wow, it's like the perfect storm of left brain, right brain stuff.
Mhm.
So once you've got the degree, what happens next? What's the career ladder look like?
Well, RoleCatcher lays it out pretty clearly. You usually start with an entry-level job, just learning the ropes, helping out the more experienced colorists.
Okay, so lots of shadowing and stuff.
Pretty much, and as you get the hang of things, you move up to like a junior colorist role. More responsibility, leading some smaller projects, working directly with designers, that kind of thing,
Sounds like that's where you really start to like put your own spin on
for
things.
sure. And then eventually you hit the big-time senior textile colorist. You're leading teams, managing those crazy complex projects. Got to stay ahead of all the trends. It's a big job.
Wow, that does sound pretty amazing. But I'm guessing it takes more than just experience to get there, right?
100%. All those resources you sent, especially that forum discussion, they all mention the same thing: continuous learning.
Yeah.
Because the technology changes so fast, new dyes and techniques pop up all the time. You got to stay on top of it all.
So it's not like you just learn everything once and then you're good, huh?
Not even close.
So what does that even look like, this continuous learning thing? I mean, are we talking like going back to school?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Some people go for a master's degree or get certified in, something specific. But there are tons of conferences and workshops too. Plus, like, the whole internet's right there. Online courses, forums, all that good stuff.
It really is amazing how much things have changed. And that actually makes me think of something. We keep talking about tech changing this whole industry, like with the virtual dyeing and those super precise tools. But do you ever think we'll get to a point where, I don't know, the tech just takes over completely? Like
Yeah.
no more need for a human eye?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Eh, It's tough to say for sure, but like even with all the tech, there's still something about color, that human touch. We don't just see wavelengths of light. It's all tied up with our culture, our memories.
Hmm.
Even how we're feeling at that moment can change how we see a color. It's kind of deep when you think about it.
Totally. A computer can probably match a shade perfectly, but could it ever understand what that color means to someone?
Exactly. It's like the tech can get us really close,
Yeah.
but I think that final bit of magic,
Hmm.
that's always going to come from a human.
That makes a lot of sense. So it really is this awesome blend of art and science.
Mm.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. I'm definitely going to be looking at the colors around me a little differently from now on.
I'm glad to hear it. This was fun.
And a big thank you to everyone who wrote in with all those awesome resources. You guys are the best. We're always looking for new topics to explore, so keep those suggestions coming. Until next time, stay curious.